Day, I think could be a quick day, but let's see what if people have opens. Are there any opens from the group?
Hi, Sean.
You're really quiet. Is that the case for everybody?
Yes, for me too, Sean.
Good. Are you able to turn up your microphone?
Hello, everybody. We can hear you fine.
All right. Dunn, do you have something you want to add?
I saw an email from Dunn. I think he's got some audio issues, Sean, but I saw an email from him. He sent the patch to add the ability to run, I think, shell apps from our CI agents that are booting QEMU and collect results. So I think he's wanting to get that reviewed and see if there's anything that needs to be changed before it can be enabled.
Okay, great.
Tan, we don't hear you. I don't know if you've got a microphone issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure if my
Okay, well, I will look for that email, and then if others have feedback, please review it on the list.
Oh yeah, thank you, Sean. Yeah, I just want to talk about this patch is about enabling packet-based unit test. If you can provide some comments or you can help to review it, that would be great.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there other opens?
What's the status of the code coverage review?
Well, last I saw, I had provided some feedback. I was actually putting it into the pull request, and then I was going to transfer it over to the mailing list, but I saw that a new patch series came out addressing my comments. So I'm not sure if there's anything left. I will go check that one, that set of mailing list patches. Okay. Other questions, other open items? One item I had is I think Oliver from Red Hat brought up that the DevOps is going to remove Ubuntu 18.04 on December 1st. We're still using that. We've had a long-standing Bugzilla around some problems with the image they had for 20.04. And I think our path forward that we were planning to land was containers. So we would be independent of the Ubuntu version. So there's been some activity on the mailing list. I don't know if anyone else has taken a look. I think one of the main questions remaining that I would be curious if anyone here has an opinion is when we move the Linux build process for CI, both core CI and platform CI, 2 containers. We will remove the, PyTools based build process that does not use containers. So for Linux, we will only use containers. We won't have the Xstep that downloads the ARM64 and ARM compilers anymore. Probably I think the NASM will be built into the container. I think we're still leaning towards ACPI compiler is external to the container, just given the platform diversity we've seen there. But that's one of the changes we weren't sure if anyone in this group would miss.
So let's talk about the impact of removing those external dependencies for developers, not the CI agents. When they try to run PyTools from a Linux environment, if you remove the external dependencies, it's not going to grab the things they need if they've set up their own environment, right?
Right. So it will not grab the GCC compilers for ARM and ARM64 that or RISC-V.
Is that the only 3 things that are being removed?
I believe those are the only 3 things that are being removed. Yes.
Okay, and we never installed the x86 compilers in Linux, right? We just have that as a dependency, implied dependency.
Yep, exactly. It was using whatever was installed on the operating system. Yeah.
Okay, so we'd have to update the setting up your development system instructions to say if you want to do ARM or RISC-V development, you need to manually install in these links to the compilers.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the challenges, I don't think people have been using it a lot for local development. I don't know if anyone knows otherwise, please share. But I think the concern we've had is that if we move to containers and we don't test that bare metal path consistently, we'll be no better off than our tools def, where we just have lots of cruft there that may or may not work, but no one's confirming it. So I think we want to keep these to a minimum so that we are always testing and always know the state of these.
Sorry, Sean, you were asking if people were using the containers for development?
No, I'm asking if anyone's been using PyTools on Linux for EDK2 development and really have been using the Xsteps that pull down the ARM64 and ARM and RISC-V compiler toolchains as defined in the core CI dependencies.
Yeah, I think this gets down to what things do we put into external dependency for PyTools and what don't we put there? Is there clear guidance on that so that we understand what the rules are for what we manage through that mechanism versus what's required for initial setup of an environment outside of PyTools?
So my thought, I think this is open for discussion. It's probably a good thing that we align on and try to write down at some point. But my thought has been that in general, EDK2 has kind of 2 roles. One, it has selfishly its own repo and wanting to make sure that its own repo is correct and valid for its own set of tested requirements. That's what we've been using the core CI scope for. So any dependency that's scoped under core CI has really been all about the EDK2 repo itself. And that's what these were scoped under. I believe well, maybe not, actually. I'll have to check that. And then the second one is providing an environment that is then included in a much larger environment for building a platform that is based on EDK2. And I think those are the ones that if we've seen them be stable for a long period of time, those are, and probably most likely impacted by the code that is in the EDK2 repository, then those are the ones we've tried to include for the development environment itself. So like NASM would fall into that category, as it hasn't changed a lot, and I think most of the assembly code that is probably linked into both open and closed source products, most of that probably does come out of EDK2.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers my question. Like, how do I distinguish the C compiler for RISC-V versus NASM, as far as why I'd make one an X step and not another one not?
Well, so I guess what I was trying to say there was, we think that NASM can be used on MIDI projects, even derivative projects based on EDK2. I think the C compiler version is much more tightly aligned with the platform you're building, and most likely the silicon vendor and silicon code you're compiling. For most of the projects, the proprietary projects that I've seen, the silicon vendor recommends a version of the compiler that may not align with EDK2, and thus, for consistency's sake, most projects compile with something recommended by their silicon vendor.
Well, the NASM assembler would fall into that same category in general, right? If they wanted to, I mean, that's.
I guess my point there, what I think I've seen in practice is that most of the assembly in a given code tree, even a derivative code tree based off of EDK2, most of that assembly code is an EDK2 code, and therefore then that's been the main driver of the NASM version and the NASM compatibility. And again, there hasn't been a lot, so I think that makes this a little easier. And so that's why we've specified it there for every derivative project. That's not to say that they couldn't override it, but in general, that's specified at a global scope. If you've noticed, the ACPI compiler is not, and that is because oftentimes the code that's not in EDK2 is the majority of the ASL, and therefore we want to let the platform define that.
So OVMF uses in the EDK2 repo has ASL code, so it has its own.
And I believe the OVMF package defines the ASL compiler it wants to use. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me confirm that, but yeah.
Has the container work been summarized in like a RFC somewhere or something like that? It seems like a pretty big impactful change, and it would be nice to get like an up-to-date summary of what's the plan is for it.
I think if you look at the container repo, that's where they've been tracking and writing some of these documents. There is some readmes in there. We've asked for some enhancements to those readmes. I think they've been updated.
Okay.
Hold on one second. So Mike, the IASL XStep is defined within the OVMF package platform CI. So it is for the OVMF, platform build. That's the version that's used.
Yep.
And it's under a scope of OVMF, so it's only for OVMF. Even if you're building other platforms within the EDK2 tree, that XStep would not get used.
Okay.
And then I think like the ARM vert, I'm going to quickly check there. My guess is they have one as well. They do. It's under their own scope, so it wouldn't get done. And then the base tools, let me find the compiler. So NASM, as we talked about, is under a scope of EDK2 build. And I think the scopes, we defined some high level guidance in the README and the PyTools README. Let me see that real quick. I think in the PyTools folder, that README at a scope. Yeah, has a couple definitions of scope. Here, I'll copy a link for anyone who wants it, but this is in the EDK2 repository. In the PyTools folder, there's a README, and it has a PyTools scope section. It talks about global, win, global NICs, talks about EDK2 build, talks about CI build, host-based test, and host test win. I am not sure that that's entirely, I think this is up to date, but I was wondering if there is a host test NICs as well, but maybe there isn't anything needed. But that can be some offline reading to help identify the scopes. But so the NASM one was done at an EDK2 build level, which is a recommendation for anyone who is building an EDK2 derivative project. The GCC RISC-V is done at a custom scope. Yeah, so these are custom scopes. So this is called the GCC RISC-V. And then I think Long Arch, actually, that's going to be a problem. We haven't added support for Long Arch in the container. And ARch64. So those are all custom scopes that were added when you wanted to build that architecture.
Okay. And that's what's being removed in order to work with the containers that have them pre-installed.
Yep.
Okay. I just didn't know, another question I had about this, you know, the idea of having the version that you already need installed, is there any way for the external dependency to figure that out before it goes and grabs and installs the component?
I don't think it's, I think you'd have to really enhance the external dependency code to do that.
Like you'd have to add an extra like check if present step, which would be like run the version command or something like that and check the version, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think something like that would have to happen. There is a version report, a tools report that is created on every build and is published in our artifacts, so you can see it, that will include the versions of these tools. So, you know, when you are running, you'll be able to see that. But I don't think there is, there's not support today for checking if something already exists on the system. I mean, because that would essentially mean that it has to be on the path, right? If you look, some of these things aren't on the path. They use a variable name to point to the location. And then that variable name is used in things like our tools def to actually access it.
Yeah, and that may be a new feature to add to external dependencies, to have a way to check if it's already installed and you know, optimize that step away. That's a performance optimization for the most part, right?
Yep.
Because what's there now, that with the custom scopes that are installing these, it's not going to do any harm other than performance, right? It's just going to reinstall into the container the tool that's already there.
Yeah, it would. Yep. If we had the same version that the container had, then it would just reinstall, or it would install into the location there. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that my summary of the conversation as far as where we're at is either remove the custom scope install steps from EDK2 and update the README for setting up your development environment. Is option one. Option two is leave them. We take a performance hit until we can implement an optimization feature to external dependencies.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yes, I think those are that's pretty clear, the options. I think one more point we're trying to make here is these were not necessarily set up for every derivative project. I don't think, you know, as the part of EDK2, we can kind of control every derivative project. Any derivative project can obviously add these back in, and they've probably been managing their versions anyways if they were doing it through this tool. As these versions are from this month last year, so they're already a year old.
Right. Other than we, you know, if a developer on their own development system is wanting to see if they accidentally broke one of the other architectures, having the environment set up for them and being able to run those tests locally is potentially useful. Or just
Yep.
the EDK2 changes for focused on that as your only build you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I would add that the containers we hope would actually provide a better experience than what this provided, right?
Yeah, but that's asking developers that have their own environments, not, you know, to set up a container as well, right?
Yes. I mean, if you were running Windows, you were already doing something weird or custom to use WSL or something otherwise, right? If we're running Linux, I mean, yeah, I guess you'd have to make sure you had Docker installed so you could install those containers. But you know, in a lot of ways, it's actually much nicer because you've just isolated all of that little weird testing code you had, so it didn't impact your normal development environment. Which again has been one of the reasons we're looking towards containers is you can spin up lots of different environments and they don't have to impact each other. It's much like our recommendation to use virtual environments for Python code is you don't want to, you know, depend on or corrupt kind of the global system.
Yep.
And so I think that is one benefit, but I agree it's a difference still. I mean, out of the 7 people here, has anyone used these and is this part of their daily workflow other than the CI system that when they push a pull request?
I've used them, but I don't use them regularly.
And I assume, Michael, since we've talked plenty about containers, that you'd be behind the switch to containers and be able to use that as well.
Yes.
And it doesn't prevent those that are doing bare metal from installing the tools as long as we document in the README the version of the tools the EDK2 builds assume.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you remember last week, I shared a document that does that. Or at least I was trying to put one together. So I was hoping that we could use that as kind of the manual steps for people to follow. And then I think Chris was going to follow up with a container document with the container instructions. And so we would make the default flow that people would see whenever they come to the build instructions be the container doc. But then we'd have a link to the manual steps as well that they could go to based on that document.
I mean, I think this is one of our major problems. I was looking through our discussion, you know, the discussion board, and I think, you know, out of the top 15 things on there, about 7 or 8 of them are being able to create the right environment to actually compile the code. And so I think getting a handle on this and maybe, again, aligning on a single infrastructure for doing this would be beneficial for the entire community, because today I think it is a major problem. And we all know the EDK2 platform discussion that we've already had around every one of those platforms has their own README with very different steps, and there's no attempt to align those. So
Yeah, I think it kind of provides another path. We were talking about aligning a lot of the EDK2 platforms behind common tool sets or minimal supported versions of tools and things like that to reduce the amount of work that someone has to do to go through and build them. But with going down the container path, it would be kind of nice if each platform just supplied their own container and then they could still have the freedom to do whatever they want and people would have a consistent flow in order to get that environment set up and build the platform. I honestly think it's almost like more useful there than in EDK2, given that EDK2 is fairly stable and the platforms vary significantly in terms of their requirements.
Yeah, I would hope that we would have a set of default containers that could work in most cases. But then obviously it would be a reasonable option for a platform to specify their own container, which carried additional dependencies, and made this easier for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's good for them to just stay up to date if they can on common containers. But they haven't done that in the past. So I'm not sure if containers alone would move them in that direction, but maybe it would be helpful to say, like, we're updating the community container. You need to get your platform to work on it or something like that.
So Mike, I think the main kind of concern I have is I think we have, 3 days. And so
Right.
I'm hoping we can maybe close this out as a CI based solution. If we want to, bring it up on the mailing list to see if there's other feedback others want to give around the old solution or this one, like that'd be great too. Yeah.
I'm fine with focused on containers, remove the external dependencies as long as the README is updated as well, so that we have for somebody that comes in new, they've got the instructions to set up their environment and they're good to go if they're wanting to do the PyTools. Obviously, they'd have to install those compilers if they're going to run things like build commands manually and stuff for those architectures, right? So it's really not new work if they're currently using build. It's only a change if they've been using PyTools in the past, and now PyTools is not going to necessarily install if they don't have them already installed.
Right.
So I'm okay with update the README and make the change to get CI going under containers and stable and dealing with the fact that Ubuntu 18 is going away.
Okay, sounds great. I was going to see if I could find the PR. We may need your help getting some approvals. This work has been going on for like nine or so months. I don't think we've yet been able to get much feedback from some of the maintainers of ARMvert and OVMF package. So we may need your help in getting some of the patch series through.
Okay.
I was hoping there was a PR that was the latest patch series that showed it all past CI, but I am not seeing one right now. So I'll check with them to find out and then send you a link.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
The only other thing I had, Michael, was your kind of topic from last week, which was all those build directions and trying to get that out, and if there was anything holding that up.
I think just the container piece is the main part. There was a few areas in the Q&A that I needed to go fill in. If anyone if anyone wants to help out with that, I'd appreciate it. But I can send the link to the document to get those filled in. If we're okay with it going in and those sections being to-dos, I could get it in very quickly. It is mostly complete except for the sections that have, like, there's a section at the bottom that says like frequent questions or most common questions, and that's the section that's blank. But it does have the example build command examples filled in, and everything else is filled in. And I think the main value that it provides versus existing instructions out there is the examples section, where it goes over common scenarios that people encounter whenever they're using Stewart locally, and it shows you the Stewart commands in order to do those things.
Okay.
Maybe I'll send the patch out on the list, and I'll just ask people if they want it to submit it as is, or it's a big deal to have the common questions filled in first.
Sounds good.
There will be a few accompanying changes in EDK2 to just clean things up that are mentioned in the document and then update some links and stuff like that. So that's another piece that will go with the wiki page.
Sounds good.
By the way, I just pushed the Dependabot patch in the EDK2. That's more of a heads up for Mike probably than anything. We should start seeing Dependabot PRs come in.
Very good.
In fact, I see one right now.
All right, other topics?
I did get all the changes updated in the CodeQL series, Mike. So all of your feedback has been addressed. I think Eric, you're just taking a quick look over the series, right? And then once you get done with that, I'll send it to the list.
Yeah, I'll have that for you tomorrow at some point.
And I did not review the MD module or the shell one. I'm waiting for those owners to do those, Michael.
Okay. I think I got MDE module feedback across most things. And I did shell too. There was a change in shell package that the shell owner wanted. So I'll see what they say on V2.
Okay.
I did hear from the security team at Intel, and they were interested in doing some CodeQL query work. So they're working on a query right now as well. Just, I guess, as an update on other people doing CodeQL work.
Sounds great. The more the merrier. We'll get there
Yep.
faster.
Yep.
Okay, well, I had two other things came to mind real quick. One, there is a big PyTools patch coming through that enables automatic documentation generation, as well as pushing the documentation to read the docs.io, which is a free service that kind of renders documentation. That should be coming through within the week, and hopefully that can help people better understand PyTools, better use and extend PyTools. But I think there's kind of some good docs in there in that we've tried to identify if you're just a user or you're just trying to build EDK2, how does PyTools help you and what do you use? If you're actually trying to build your own platform, how do you use PyTools? And then finally, if you want to extend the capability of PyTools, how do you do that? So there's 3 layers of docs that are kind of going up. And then the other one I just noticed from last week, we said that we would try to have a EDK2 platforms focused discussion on December 5th. So that is next week. So any pre-work that needs to get done there, this is your 1 week notice.
Are we going to try to bring more of those maintainers to the meeting?
Yeah.
Because I don't think other than Mike Kinney, anyone here really owns anything in EDK2 platforms at the moment that I'm aware of.
Mike, when's the next community meeting? Is it before? The calendar.
It was canceled for December.
I see. I guess if I send out a meeting note or a note for that meeting today or tomorrow, just asking that anyone who's a maintainer at least read the note and respond. If they can attend the meeting, that's great. If they have feedback around meeting times, it would be better. That's fine too.
You might actually send it to the maintainers out of maintainers.txt.
Okay,
You know, the double announcement's great, but you know how people's filters get set up.
Yeah. Did you ever have any luck? I know a while ago we talked about actually reviewing that maintainers.txt and kind of re-asking everyone, are they still doing the role of maintainer and want their platform there? Did that ever get completed?
It did not get completed. I started some of it and I've got some feedback, but I need to follow up and actually at the platform scope, I don't have that data. I was looking more at the initial pass through the maintainers.
Okay.
Get maintainer.txt cleaned up, but we do, and I know that even Leif from an ARM perspective had noted that there's some platforms that are no longer in support or maintenance by anybody. So I think there is a list of ones, and I think that, you know, the options for those are, you know, obviously delete from the main branch of EDK2 platforms, but the question is, what do you do with the content that's there? The README for EDK2 platforms describes the idea of stable or development branches. So it may be that some of those older ones that were stable at some point in the past could be migrated to a stable branch. So they're still there. They're obviously there in the history as well. But that's kind of the discussion that needs to occur, since we've really never done any cleanup like this within that repository, is determining what do we do with a platform that has been into what we consider past the development, but into the main branch, you know, support mode, but then later becomes no longer maintained or supported. What do we do with it at that point in time? I said there's two lines of thought. One is delete, and it's always there in the history, or delete and move to a separate branch.
Okay, makes sense. I'll try to get a mail out to the thread and to the maintainers. Yep.
But the best way to have improvement in code quality and stability is delete. So I'm all for it.
Sounds good to me.
That goes faster than Michael's code QL work. If you delete the code that's got the problem.
I've deleted quite a bit of code at EDK2 platforms before. Unfortunately, it got added back a few months later, but that goes to the point of it being in the history.
All right. Anything else from anyone?
The EDK2 based tools, we mentioned the C tools transfer to Python tools several weeks ago, and I listed all of them into the EDK2 based tools issue section, and we will update the status in there. And if have any update, and I will also share in this meeting.
Okay, sounds great. I do see all
Yeah.
those new enhancements. That's great.
And if you haven't seen the patch, Christina, I think thank you for the new VFR compiler written in Python. The front end
Yeah.
of it, the back end does not do IFR yet. I know that's a future work item, but that's a huge step to get the front end of that compiler into Python.
Yes, currently the Python VFR compiler can support the parser function and generate extended YAML and the JSON files, which includes all the variables related form site info and the default value info. And we will keep going and to generate the IFR binary, which synced with the C tools in the future, and we'll keep send the patch.
And I think one of the more interesting challenges here is, and I think it's for the whole group, is if we get a new implementation of the VFR compiler implemented in Python, we're going to want to know that it has the exact same behavior as the C implementation of the tool before we switch over to it. So I think
Yes.
Christine's already been thinking about some validation strategies. If others have ideas on validation strategies, I think we want to collect those because we want to have high confidence that that switchover would not have any side effects.
Thanks.
Sounds good. Is there any work going on right now in the base tools to actually stand up like automated testing on those? Like I know there's been some tests in there. But I haven't seen any effort to stand up any kind of standard way to plug in tests for these new tools you're developing.
Yeah.
For the PyTools repos, Sean, what are you're using unit test as the standard framework, right, for Python code?
Yep.
Okay.
And I think, you know, that's how we test at the function level. I think there is also an integration test that uses robot framework. So there's kind of both done in PyTools.
Christine, I think you were going to add something.
Okay. Currently we are working on the GenSci C tools to transfer to Python, and when we do this Python tools transfer, we after the code developing, and we will add the unit test of each tools, and to submit the patch with the developed code together. And for the just for the Python verifier compiler, because it is huge work, and so we just send the patch, and currently still not do the completely unit test yet. For other tools, when we send the patch, we will also send the unit test patch.
And which framework are you using in Python for those?
We just designed the unit test test case for each for each tool.
Is it, you mean it's more of a functional test? It's testing the behavior at the command line?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, that's our, sorry, I just, there's a lot of confusion, I think, in many conversations I have about the names of the types of testing. So
Yes.
I think unit testing is about testing the individual APIs within your target code. And then you have integration tests and functional tests that are at a higher level. So
okay. So we do the functional test.
So I think the recommendation is, if possible, we'd like to see unit tests implemented against new Python code. So I encourage you to at least review that module, and I've got some other contacts maybe inside of Intel that have experience with these different frameworks that you can talk to, or you can also look at the PyTools examples use of unit test.
Sure. I will invest it and to use the unit test for the tools development.
Okay, sounds great. All right, anything else before we drop? All right, thank you, everyone.
Hey, John, this is Harry. Do you have a few minutes to talk separately?
Sure.
We can start a new meeting, or that would be fine.
Yeah, I saw your email. I'll call you. Does that work?
Okay, all right. Yeah, thanks. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.